As most of you know who've been around the Casey universe for a while, part of how we've done what we've done is by following the best of the best in the business. We have our Casey's Explorers League honorees, and we have made money time and time again by backing these guys early in their process of their next win or their next discovery. As an offshoot of that, you know, nobody's getting any younger. We're looking at the up-and-coming talent in the field. And so this was actually my colleague Marin Katusa's idea. We call it the NexTen. And the idea is to recognize the upcoming stars in the business. The top 10 under 40 was the concept. And these are busy people, but we managed to get a couple of them to sit down long enough to discuss with us a little bit of how they've done what they've done, maybe who mentored you and how did you make the notable achievements that both of you have done. This gives you a chance to toot your own horn, and I hope you won't be too shy, because we really are interested in the process. And I know Morgan pretty well, and I know something about where Morgan came from, but Amir, you're Marin's friend, and I don't know that much about you and how you've been able to achieve what you've done. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the rising stars. It's unfortunate that we don't have a bigger audience in here, because this really is one of the key ways of how you make money in this business. If you're familiar with Casey's 8 Ps, what's the first P? People. And you have to back the right people. And even the best rocks in the world can be screwed up by the wrong people. So amongst the rising stars, people that we see being future Explorers League honorees, serially successful people, we have all the people listed in the NexTen booklet, and here with us today we have Amir Adnani from UEC, and we have Morgan Poliquin from Almaden Minerals. Amir, you're the mystery man to me, so why don't we start with you. Tell us a little bit about how you got here. How did you put this UEC thing together? What inspired you? What makes you work so hard? How did it happen? And
I don't know if I want to be, by the way, does that work? Everyone can hear me okay? Okay. Being someone who was born in Iran and is mining uranium in the US, I don't know if I want to be dubbed the mystery man. I don't know if that really helps. But there's actually somewhat of a parallel in terms of sort of my inspiration and kind of mentorship with how sort of Morgan actually is in the business, and that I really learned about the metal business and the mining business from my dad, who was very involved as an entrepreneur in the steel business in the Middle East. And again, being born in Iran after the Iranian Revolution, the government nationalized the steel business. And so there was a lot of changes to the family business that took place as a result of that. But from the earliest memories that I have that I can remember, I was always very much inspired by the fact that my dad was a businessman, an entrepreneur. He was in the hard asset business, he was in the steel business. And that's something that really kind of gave me this bug, this sense of really wanting to pursue entrepreneurial endeavors when I got going, when I got older. And I got started immediately right out of university, starting my first company that I started back then that looked at connecting capital from investors in the Middle East, again, where my heritage was and where I knew people, where the family relationships were, connecting that capital with mining companies in Canada. And traditionally, investors in the Middle East understand the hard asset, they understand gold and silver bullion, but they really don't understand the business of mineral exploration. And it's tough to be in Vancouver, and even though I was born in Iran, I grew up in Vancouver, I went to University of British Columbia, it's tough to be here and not miss the fact that this is the epicenter of exploration in the world. This is the Silicon Valley to the mining industry, the way Silicon Valley is to the technology industry. And so there was a huge competitive advantage that I had being in Vancouver, having gone to university here, having been educated here, to utilize the relationships and the capital in the Middle East and match that with what is truly a capital-intensive business. Mineral exploration and mining, as we all know, is very capital-intensive. As Rick Rule famously says, without capital, there's no business in mining. And so that's how I got going. Now, all of that led to, and so my experience very much comes from understanding how to raise money, how to build companies, how companies are built, and how they fail after they've raised money if you don't execute correctly. But what made me focus on the uranium business, and 6 years ago start Uranium Energy Corp and turn it into a uranium producer today, was the scarcity factor. I was amazed then, and I'm amazed today, that there are only 7 or 8 companies mining uranium in the world. And to me, it was a unique opportunity to actually go out there and build a producing uranium company because I saw incredible growth ahead of the sector in terms of nuclear expansion growth, but saw very little activity in terms of companies that were actually mining uranium. I'll stop there because I'm sure there's going to be other questions, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of color. Takes away some of the mystery.
Yeah, that's very, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Okay, yeah, we'll come back with more questions, but let's switch to Morgan here. And the airplane overhead. But I think most of our subscribers will know about Dwayne, and they know there's a family connection, but why don't you tell us a little bit about the story? Was there a rebellious phase where you didn't want to have anything to do with rocks, or were you always inspired to follow your father's footsteps, or exceed them, or?
Do I look like a rebel?
Well, I've seen you out of the suit, you know, so.
Vancouver is the epicenter of mineral exploration business. That's very true, but nevertheless, it's amazing how few people who grew up in the city know that. Building occupancy, being exploration companies. When people meet me, and they always ask, "How did you get into this?" And it's not uncommon that there is a lot of familial relationships in this business because it is unusual. Prospecting isn't something that a lot of kids want to be firemen and policemen and things, but prospecting probably isn't one of the first things that come to mind for a little boy. But for me as a little boy, from 3 years old and on, I was my father's field assistant. And I had a, front row seat to this business, and there's a lot of aspects. There's the opportunity to be entrepreneurial. The activity in and of itself involves intellectual capital principally. Is the principal capital. You have to have a way of deploying, following through with the intellectual capital, using money to do so. But ultimately, it's an ideas game, and that's what's exciting. So, as a young person, obviously there's other forums out there to do it, but to come up with an idea and to turn it into something tangible, to go out and develop an idea into something real is fairly unique in this world. And exploration still provides that. And you don't have to be a professional. You don't have to be have graduate degrees in geology. There's plenty of people. Sean Ryan is quite rightly heralded person who is came up with some concepts and turned them into reality. And the opportunity exists to do that. And I believe that that's possible. And I think that's part of being a prospector and what's so exciting about the industry.
Okay. So, if you don't mind my asking, how old were you when you first started jumping out of helicopters on your own, hammering on rocks, and really taking on the responsibility of developing value for Almaden? Well, not single-handedly, of course, but...
Yeah, I never considered it another career. I never thought about doing anything else. It was the only thing that interested me. And when the opportunity presented itself quite readily to work with Dwayne, that was a no-brainer for me. I had certainly opportunities to go work with major companies, and that's a great route. I did some grad work in the South Pacific, and there was ample opportunities to go do exciting things with big companies, but to get out there with pretty limited capital, mind you, but great mentorship, great intellectual capital, and be able to have the freedom, insofar as a small treasury allowed, to go out there and follow up ideas. Tremendous opportunity. So that was as soon as I was out of university.
Okay, so as soon as you're out of university, and how can you all hear? By the way, it's really booming over there. But I know there are multiple speakers in here. We're okay? All right. Okay. So right out of university, so 22, 23, 24, you're out there?
Yeah, that kind of an age. Before I really formally started working with with Dwayne. I had staked a few properties on my own, so I was always interested in prospecting concepts and ideas.
And how old were you when you became president of the company?
I don't quite recall, but I think it's probably 5 years or something in that realm.
More or less?
Yeah, something like that. I don't remember. I don't remember there being it was a pretty small shop, so I don't remember there being an enormous distinction either.
Okay, so it's a pretty rapid career path here, and I will say, as an independent outsider, it's not because he's the boss's son. I mean, Morgan is responsible for a significant portion of Almaden's discoveries. There's a picture, I think in the current issue of the International Speculator, from the Ixtaca zone, that Morgan was the geologist who identified the outcrop, had the theory of where to drill, pointed the drill bit at it, and made the discovery. So no nepotism here. It was, I guess, just over a decade. You know, that's pretty fast.
Well, I certainly have a generation to build upon, and very fortunate in that. I wouldn't be here without my parents.
Sure. Well, okay, but like aside from genetics,
so I had a lot of luck along the way, and I think as a prospector you need a lot of luck, but you have to make it. I think, you know, there's I won't mention his name or any of the names that would. There's a lot of people out there who are modern Malthusians. There's a lot of people who don't believe there's something to find. And I argue that the biggest deposits, the richest deposits of virtually any classification that geologists would use for mineral deposits have been found in the last decade. Epithermal deposits, the biggest, Fruta del Norte is unbelievable. Porphyry deposits, you look at Oyu Tolgoi and Pebble East. I mean, the list, there are things to find, and you have to believe that in the first place. If you believe that there aren't things to find and we have to mine lower and lower grade deposits and exploration is pointless, there's no point starting on that route. So
that's really interesting. So we have drive, we have hard work. I don't know if you caught that. He said before he started working with Almaden, he'd already staked some of his own properties. He already had that entrepreneurial spirit. He had that go get 'em. And Amir started also his first business right out of school, or were you still in school when you started it? Or
yeah.
And you know, what made you think that you could do that? I mean, why didn't you go get a job at some big company and do the corporate drone thing for a while before growing up and becoming responsible and then trying your own thing?
I guess you don't know any better. I don't know. I mean, you just have, you don't fully understand the challenges, but you have the confidence and the spirit to do it. Frankly, I think in the mineral exploration business, you have a generation gap where for a very long time, there wasn't a lot of money, there wasn't a lot of interest. And so there isn't just a shortage of technicians out there, geologists, engineers, but there also is a shortage of entrepreneurs in the sector that are willing to take the risk, that are willing to build the teams, that are willing to gather the financial resources to go do this. And I think maybe the timing of the cycle was in my favor, and that if I was coming into this fresh out of school today, it would be less plausible to say, I just want to be an entrepreneur in the resource sector and let me go try my luck, because you're competing basically for fewer quality projects, fewer available people, and a lot more entrepreneurs. And so I think maybe part of it had to do with timing, where we were in the cycle, and just the fact that sometimes you just don't know any better, and you throw caution to the wind and go from there. I remember thinking to myself, it was a great time to take risks because I was young, out of school, I didn't have a family to worry about or kids to worry about or anything like that. So if I fail, it's not a big deal.
Well, that's interesting. How many of you have sat in on a panel where our Explorers League honorees, the older generation, has talked about their achievements and what they've done? Has anybody listened to these guys talk about what they do? You hear the same kinds of things, and they'll talk about luck, and they'll be modest. But the fact of the matter is that these are people who are not run-of-the-mill people. I mean, how many college graduates think about staking their own properties or starting their own business off the bat? No, most of them are looking for a job. They're looking for somebody else to tell them what to do and pay them to do it. I think this is an important distinguishing characteristic of our explorers and our future explorers. not to be too shameless, a touting opportunity here, but for those in the audience who may not know something of your successes as well as I do, Amir, can you give us a quick recap of the shareholder value you've created in UEC?
Well, basically, UEC stands for Uranium Energy Corp. It's a company that I started in 2005. We started it basically from scratch, from nothing. And we took it public in 2006, so it was private for a year. I've been acting as the CEO of the company since starting the company in 2005. From 2005 until 3 weeks ago, we've raised a total of about $140 million in equity to move the company forward, and have done probably 10 M&A transactions to fast track our development, buying a processing plant, buying projects that had a license, basically maneuvering to try to speed things up. And as the name of the company suggests, Uranium Energy Corp is a uranium exploration-focused company. But basically within 6 years, so we went public February 2006, and by late 2010, early 2011, we had started mining uranium. And so today, Uranium Energy Corp is North America's newest uranium producer. And what I'm proud of in terms of shareholder value is that we've started mining uranium and we have zero debt on our balance sheet. We started mining without taking on any debt. And in this environment, with all the financial crises that are out there, the debt issues that are out there, the sovereign debt issues that are out there, it's great to be able to say that you're mining something, but that you're debt-free. And we have 80 million shares outstanding. And so again, we've kept a lot of value on a per share basis in the company. Again, we started at zero. The first money that I raised was at 10 cents a share. We went as high as $9 a share when uranium was hot in the summer of '07. We came all the way down to 20 cents a share in 2008 with the whole resource sector basically crumbling. And from there, we went back up, then Fukushima happened. And so we came back down, and anyways, today, the company has a decent market cap. We're well followed. BlackRock, for example, which is the world's biggest mutual fund, owns a big chunk of our company. Big funds like Oppenheimer are involved. And so we have good institutional support today, but I say for me, I cherish the fact that in the last 6 or 7 years, as someone who started a uranium company, I got to live through the financial crisis of 2008, because I think that's when I learned the most in 2008 than I've ever learned. And to some extent, as painful as Fukushima was, it really builds character for the company and for the team when you go through those very difficult events, and whether it's for your industry or whether it's the broader capital markets. And I'll talk more about the nuclear industry tomorrow on a uranium panel or talk. But basically, that's what I've done with Uranium Energy Corp. Today, we're producing uranium, and our goal over the next 3 years is to become the biggest uranium producer in the United States. Our projects are all based in the US. And about 2.5 years ago, I started my second company, a gold company called Brazil Resources. And that's a company that's just been public for about a year now. I want to emulate what we've done in the uranium business and the gold business in Brazil. The plan over the next 5 years is to become a gold producer in that country. And we have one of the oldest Brazilian banks already involved as an 11% shareholder. A fund that is co-managed by Marion Katusa and Rick Rule owns a big interest in the company. And we're well financed, and we're well set up with a good technical team to move forward. And how we built Uranium Energy Corp was focusing on assembling a technical team that had the right experience for the uranium sector. And I've taken the same play out of that playbook to apply to Brazil Resources and building that company. So those are the two companies that I'm involved with, Uranium Energy and Brazil Resources.
This is obviously not an ordinary young man. How many people can have a startup in a sector that literally has a nuclear meltdown and come out of it with a profitable business that's growing? And I believe you will hit your 3-year goal. That's quite a goal. So coming back on this side, Morgan, how many, I don't want to call them ore bodies because they're not in production, but how many significant zones of new mineralization have you actually discovered? How many Ixtacas or El Cobres, or how many things have you identified where there was nothing known before and now there's mineralization that's being explored and advanced?
Well, we've spent the last 10 years or so trying to identify new areas of mineralization. So there's a lot of, we have about 40 projects in the company that are mostly in Mexico, and most of which have never had a drill hole. So they're identified as areas of potential mineralization that will be drilled. So,
how many of those did you identify and bring into the portfolio? You personally?
I would say majority of them. Most of those projects I had something to do with in terms of concept and identifying them in the field. So we're an early stage company. These things are a long way from being mines or being proven up. But what we think we've shown in the last couple of years is that they're all high potential projects in an area that is very poorly understood geologically. So what we did is, and our philosophy, the philosophy that my father and I share together, is that exploration is actually fairly low risk in the mining industry. And that sounds like a strange statement. The odds are very long, and I think anybody who's been around this business knows that. But if you're doing it right, the capital doesn't have to be that high, and risk is a factor of capital and odds. Putting a mine in production has much lower odds. Of course, you've identified a deposit and you've put economics on it and done a lot of engineering studies, but there's a lot of mines that don't work out, and you're deploying an enormous amount of capital. So in that sense, exploration, every time you drill a hole, you're trying to hit it out of the park. And if you can manage to do that with fairly low capital, you're doing something that we think is fairly low risk for that big home run. And what our little company has tried to do is deploy some real intellectual capital and do cheap exploration and identify areas that have that home run potential using some high-end science, acquire them before they are known. Most of our projects in Mexico don't show up on, for example, Caballo Blanco is a property that we went to very early on, acquired the claims. There was a couple of claims there, but we acquired those claims and did the mapping, identified what kind of a thing this was. We identified it independently and thought there was a great potential for, it's a home run type target. It's now a 1 million ounce deposit. So that's the strategy we employ, is looking at the odds overall. And what we'd like to do going forward is take those projects. This stemmed from a question you asked me how many things I identified. We want to drill them and do that early stage exploration. And we think that you reduce the odds, the more holes you drill.
Okay, very good. We try to give you advance warning so you could get your mental gears tuned up for this. But we're on the lookout for more NexTen people. We are happy with our investments in your companies, but we want to know, who are the other guys out there to look for. And so we thought, rather than scope the field from above, we would ask you about your peers. Are there any people out there that you know of working in the resource sector that you would consider top 10 under 40 type material, people whose careers that we should look at, whose companies we should take seriously and consider for investment and involvement?
I'll let Morgan go first, because maybe I didn't get that heads up, so I'll think about it while he answers it.
Okay.
I did get it, so I got a couple of quick answers.
All right, you go.
Two people that I know, and I don't think they're under 40. Maybe they wouldn't like me saying that, but Mark Blythe is a fellow who runs a company called Tarsus Resources, and it was formulated out of some Almaden projects initially, and they've become a genuine prospect generator and have found, using some of the type of techniques that Almaden has employed, turning over a large volume of projects or areas of potential and identifying projects from scratch, and have acquired some new assets that are quite exciting. That's one group that is doing that, and Mark Blythe runs that. Another fellow I really like, I've known a long time, I went through university with him, is Jason Weber. He runs a company called Kiska, they're focused on developing a particular project in some tough times. But he's a very earnest, diligent person who I think be there long term for his shareholders.
I've met Jason and I liked him. So if his company delivers, or I guess he's involved in a couple different things, but if he comes through, I would definitely put him on my list. Those are good suggestions. That spark any thoughts, Amir?
I guess sticking to stuff I know well, I mean, in the uranium sector, which I'm involved with, there's a guy, Jim Paterson, who runs a company called Kivalec Energy, that I think they've done a good job setting up a resource in the Nunavut area in Canada. There's uranium there. They're making some good results and progress out of it. They've raised money recently, which is a good sign that they're able to kind of survive even in a tough environment like the one right now. And I think I think just off the top of my head, I think Jim would be under 40, if that's the criteria here.
More or less.
But yeah, I think...
we're looking for the rising stars.
Yeah, I think Jim's done a very good job with Kivalec. I think, is it supposed to be people that just run companies, or could be involved in other facets of the business?
Anybody that these people would be well advised to pay attention to. These guys' careers will be marked by success.
Just to mix it up, because we talked about people that are running companies, I think that there are a number of, let's say, younger people on the financial side of the mining sector that are managing money for wealthy individuals, or are building portfolios or making investments in junior resources. I think guys like Seth Allen is with Raymond James. He's someone who's always impressed me when I've met him at your conferences, actually. Mm-hmm. And he's someone who's very focused on sort of understanding the sector, finding the right management teams in his own right. And he's someone that I guess people here can talk to or open up an account with or whatnot. And at some point, you guys should consider putting your own Marin Katusa on the NexTen list, because he's under 40 and has done quite well with his fund and working with you and Rick and everyone else, right?
That's a good point. I don't qualify. I'm an old wolf. But are we patting ourselves on the back if we give Marin the award? He certainly deserves it. He's created a huge amount of value for a lot of people. That's a thought. We'll have to think about it.
He's not here, so this is an appropriate time
we can talk about him.
Behind
his new heart. I'm going to throw one in here as sort of an early bird warning. We gave an award this morning during our Best of Show Awards to a young man named Ben Mossman with Banks Island Gold. I heard about this company, and they had a lot of good things going for them. They had a tremendously profitable looking PEA on a little gold project that could turn into a big gold project. So I went out to have a look, and I got to the airport, and this young guy comes up and shakes my hand and says he's the president, and it looked like I should be wondering if, he's wet behind the ears. Was he still wearing diapers? He's a kid. Did he even shave yet? I don't know. And it turns out he does shave. But I tell you, at first I was taken aback. I was like, this kid's too young to run this company. But here we have evidence that that's not necessarily a bad thing. But what really turned my attitude around was that he's the guy that built the Belkino mine for Alexco. And that's a mine that's growing and growing. It's making money. It needs fine-tuning on the zinc circuit now that they're bringing their new zinc deposit online. And, mines are things that grow and evolve. But the fact is, he built this mine, and he made it in such a way that it made money from the get-go. Of course, it helps to have super high grade and so on. But I was very impressed, because it's not easy to put a mine into production. A lot of people in the industry, we say, break their pick. You break your pick if you try to build a mine and it doesn't work. So he's done it before. He's working on it again. The reason why I wouldn't put him on NexTen now is because he hasn't actually done it yet in his company. So if Banks Island Gold is successful, if he delivers on what he says he's going to do, then I think this will be a young man to really pay close attention to, because that will absolutely be the beginning, not the end of that career. So that would be my candidate for upcoming. Now, flipping it around, looking at the older generation, we've got the Dwayne Poliquins, the Simon Ridgways, the tried and true explorers, are there any one of those that's like your hero or the one you pay the most attention to? You don't get to pick your dad. In addition to your dad, or dads, is there somebody in this industry out there that isn't NexTen, but you think our readers should do well to pay attention to, and their upcoming projects, efforts, endeavors? Amir?
I'll just talk about something that I can, I guess, draw from an experience from without just mentioning someone. But I had the experience and sort of pleasure this January to be on a marketing roadshow in Europe with Ross Speedy, and I knew a lot about Ross's accomplishments and background and success in the resource sector prior to this trip, but I was amazed at the fact that we spent 3 days on the road, and on those 3 days I got to see someone who, despite the fact that it's had tremendous success, was working at the same type of level that I was in terms of someone who's younger and sort of putting in more effort. We were in the same cities, doing meetings back to back, doing luncheon presentations, and from what I learned, he's got a variety of interests still, from copper in Eastern Europe to alternative energy projects and companies that he has, and I really appreciated the fact that Ross is one of these people in the industry who was born and raised in Vancouver, and not that there's anything wrong with not being born and raised in Vancouver, Louis, but I like guys that really recognize and give back to the Vancouver community as well, to our universities here, to our hospitals, and he's done a great job at that. And that was very inspiring for me, and that's someone that I really sort of appreciated spending time with and was inspiring, but also like the values that he stands for, and I like the fact that he's from here, and I like the fact that he's giving back here to Vancouver as well, because we have people from all walks of life that end up coming to Vancouver because this is the place, again, the epicenter where things happen for mineral business. So you have lots of people that come here that may not have that, let's say, the care and appreciation for the city, but you have people that really understand it as well. And it's important we give back to Vancouver, because if we want to keep this going, the universities have to be better, the city's got to be more appreciative of what we're doing, and not to get political, but if the NDPs come to power on the provincial level, that may not be a good thing. So we got to be aware of all these things. But anyways, I'll leave it there.
A miner with a heart. We won't say a heart of gold, though, in your case.
I had to get my political 2 cents in.
That's fine. Morgan, other than your father, who are the people out there who are really burning up the trail, and whose careers we should pay attention to as investors?
Well, just in terms of some real role models, in terms of the discovery of the millennium is probably Chuck Fipke and Stu Blusson. Chuck Fipke spent decades tracing down spurious data that was sneered at by anyone in the geological community, or most in the geological community, until they found the richest diamond mines in the world in the Northwest Territories. It started at the Mackenzie River. Anyone knows distances. They wound up working better part of 1,000 miles, I think, east to find that thing. So negotiated a royalty, a personal royalty, when BHP took it over. A remarkable story that I think any prospector talks about. It speaks of perseverance and belief. In terms of a couple of people, little maybe better known to this group.
Sorry, just following up on that. The Canadian diamond fields are, massive, game-changing discovery. Are those guys involved in new companies now? Is there a way to invest on these guys, or are we just recognizing them?
Well, I think Stu prospects on his own account, by and large, and I know Chuck has a public company that, until recently anyway, was doing some interesting prospecting in Yemen. I'm not sure how that's working out right now. But yeah, pretty remarkable people, and a remarkable story that is inspiring in terms of being a prospector. I think probably the most remarkable discovery, to use that word, in the last 18 months is what Bob Quartermain has done in Pretium Resources. Extraordinary resource growth of high grade. So he's a gentleman that I think everyone should notice what what he can do with a new company. I'm geologically focused, so a person that I've always thought highly of and admire is Ron Netoliski, who's close to home here as well.
Right, right. Another member of the Explorers League. Okay, words to the wise there. We have a little bit of time left. Are there any questions for our young bucks here on up-and-coming opportunities? Okay, no, well, we'll let you escape then and get back to what you do, creating value for shareholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.